Now I'm ready to stitch the upper to the sole. I've got my lines that show me where the center of the heel is on both layers, and I'm using this handmade stitching awl. Just cut this out of a little branch of hardwood and took a stitching awl needle from any of the kits and drilled a hole and then epoxied the needle into that hole. So you can have a stitching awl for the price of the needle, and I like the simplicity of this. So I go into that. So I'm going into the hole that is counterclockwise from the center of the heel marks, and now I have a job of pulling half of the thread to the underside of the shoe so that I can use that like a bobbin thread and have half the thread on the top. So I'm using this thumb a lot, pushing, and what should happen is that the thread is waxy, so one side should get stuck in the groove that's on one side of this needle, and then the other side bow out. So it's this, I have to feel it. So this is the side that does not have a groove. So that's the side that I need to pull to that underside to be the bobbin thread. So I'll pull that thread through. I'll probably stick something in that loop and keep pulling until I've got thread on the back. So I've increased the size of that little loop, and I'm going to keep pulling until I get to the end of the thread. There we go. So now I've got thread on the bottom of the sole, and also I'll have thread on top of the upper. So now I'll pull this back, and there are videos online that show you how to use the stitching awl, and I use it. My thumb there is very important to push and then pull what will now be the upper thread. So I'm going to even out these lengths. So I have half under the shoe and half above the shoe. Okay, now I'm ready to take my first real stitch. So I go in this next hole and push it through the sole, pull back, and I should get a little loop on one side, which I do, and I'm going to just take a pinch here of this bobbin thread and poke it through that loop and then pull. So I'm pulling my bobbin thread, the thread on the bottom of the sole, through that little loop. And if I use my thumb and push here and then pull back, I've made a stitch. And pull each time really hard to kind of compress the natural rubber as much as possible so the thread's not just lying on the bottom. It could get worn away pretty fast. So when I pull my thread through, I want to get this join. So there's the join part. You can see this little loop around this upper thread. So I want to get that kind of halfway in between. So I pull just a little bit so that join is neither not visible on the upper or on the sole. Okay, I'll take another couple of stitches to show you. I'm going through the next hole, and then I'm poking through. I use my belly to push against, so you might want to do that too. Making sure with my thumbnail that I've got this side without the groove. And then I'll take this little pinch and take it through that loop on the needle, and then push with my thumb and pull back, and I've made another stitch. Now if you make the next stitch, find the next hole in the sole, push against it, and if I so I form a little loop here, but if I happen to, well, I was trying to show you what happens if you put it through the side that's in the groove instead of through the loop, but that's really tight in that groove, so I can't demonstrate that. So I'm just take my little loop, go through the loop here, and so if you do go through the wrong side of the needle, when you pull it through and your awl is stuck, then just unthread it and make the stitch again. So I'm going to keep doing this all the way around the shoe, pulling tight until I get back to the spot where I started. I think I'll show you how to navigate in the toe area. It has that toe box. It's a little harder there. So I'll come back and show you that step. So I've stitched all the way around the outside of the shoe, and now I'm in that area where the toe box is. You can see it here on the inside. I have run it under the faucet so that it is quite wet, and then give it at least 5 minutes for the water to penetrate, and then I'm ready to continue. However, in this area the stitches are further apart than they are on the sole, so that means I'm going to have to gather the leather a bit, and that's why we skived so much to thin this down so that it could all fit in there a little easier. So going in my next stitch, then the next hole in the sole, go all the way down through, pull back, and I've got a mark here that shows me where the ungrooved side is, so it's a little faster to find that. So make a little pinch here, pull it through, and now I'm ready to pull that stitch through. And so I'm going to pull really hard to get it gathered, and then the next stitch. So I'm really just operating with a couple inches here of the stitching awl. Okay, poked again through there. Use my thumb to draw it back, and here's my mark. So I know that this is my side with the ungrooved side. So I bring that loop through, use my thumb, pull back, and another gathered stitch. I think you hear me groaning here. The next one, So I have 3 or 4 more stitches to do in this area. I'll come back and show you when they're finished, how the area pops up a bit. Here you see how gathering the stitches on the upper, on the vamp, cause this area to kind of pop up nicely. So it looks good there in the toe area, and having the vegetable tanned toe box in there will keep it smooth like this. I've made it all around the shoe and have a couple of stitches left to do back here at the heel. So I'll continue with the same process of poking through, making the little loop, bringing my other thread through it, using my thumb to pull back, and then pull very tight. I think it might be a good idea to wear gloves while you do this. Some nice thick wintry gloves, because pulling on this thread as hard as it needs to be pulled is not so easy on your hands. So this is my last stitch. I got the right number of holes, so it worked out that I used up all the holes on both layers. Okay, now I'm going to take the thread out of the stitching awl. I don't need that anymore. And I'll be taking the threads up and down through a few holes here so that I have the holes filled thick with waxy thread, and that makes the best plug. I don't tie any knots or anything like that. So I'll show you how that's done. I'm ready to anchor these threads by going up and down through the stitching holes here a few times so that the wax plug, the wax thread, gets pretty thick so that the thread will not come out. I've already done this one. Maybe you can see there's 2 threads there now. So that's the end of one thread. The other thread that was on the bottom, I'm coming up with it. Then I'm going to go down through that same waxy plug hole. So that's why I don't cut this thread off. I don't want it to get pushed down when I put another thread in that hole. So I'm going down through here. Pulling it through. And then I'll come back up. Can go either way, just so I end up with my threads at the top for snipping off. So I'm pushing that with the pliers. And I could go one more time down through here and back up just to make sure that I've caught everything well, caught all the thread well in these holes. And bring that one up, and then it's time to snip them off. So here's some clippers. Get that close to the end. And my stitching is done. But the shoe looks kind of sad. Hasn't been stretched out to its full shape, and it needs some lacing. So I'll be back when I have a last in here that I'll re-wet the toe box, so that re-wet toe box can get formed to the shape of the last or rolled up paper bag that you put in there, and I'll have a tie on it also. I poured some water in here and sloshed it around and then poured it out. And I found a shoelace that I think will look nice with this shoe. And I have a pair of lasts here. They've been used a lot, so they look pretty grubby. That will fit in here and cause that toe box to stay in this raised up position while it dries. And these lasts are made from directions that I've written out, and they're in my shoemaking book. And so then this piece goes in at the back to force that toe box to stay formed. So I can't wait to wear these. I'll leave them on this last for a few days just to get kind of memorized the shape that the shoe should be in, and then they'll be ready to wear. Here's a side view of the completed shoe.